Welcome to the Pulse for Good channel. Today we're talking about the point in time count, the count by which we understand how many homeless individuals there are in the United States. We're going to talk about what it is, how it's conducted, and potentially some of the flaws with the count, as well as how you can help make the count a little bit better. At some point in January, or sometimes early February, your community will conduct a count of how many individuals are experiencing homelessness. This count happens every year, and a larger count of how many unsheltered individuals, meaning those that aren't staying in shelters or in temporary housing, will be conducted at least every other year, although most communities do it each year, right? In the middle of the night, a group will go out. Depending on the size of your community, this could be a very large group with thousands of volunteers. Other communities, like the one that's my hometown, will end up having just a few people as they go out and canvass different areas where homeless individuals are known to be able to be. They will physically count how many people they can, often on a sheet of paper, sometimes even in a new app where people can fill out how many people they find. This gives the local communities a good idea of how many individuals are experiencing homelessness at the point when most people, if possible, will be able to have some form of other shelter. Now, if you think about it this way, the worst time in rural Utah, right, where I'm at, to experience homelessness is the middle of January. The coldest temperatures, the worst experiences. Right? And so most people would have sought shelter if it was possible for them. They will stay at a friend's, they will stay with family, they will do whatever they can to not be out on the street. Or they'll seek shelter inside of one of the homeless shelters that are offered. Now, the count is done to try and understand how many individuals still don't have shelter. And when we call it a count, it literally is exactly that. You'll get a bunch of volunteers. They'll be trained a few days beforehand or sometimes a few hours beforehand. They'll go out in the middle of the night because they assume the middle of the night is the point where the most people will have sought shelter. And they will physically count how many people. Sometimes they'll even survey people at this point in time at night and try and understand a better idea of what their experience is and how they can help. This count takes place all over the country. Now, the range for the count changes, but it's always that end of January time period. And there can be some exceptions from HUD, and things can move around just a little bit. And in fact, this year, in 2021, there's some exceptions. Most large communities, I should say, aren't conducting a count because of the issues with COVID. But you'll see that most of them end up doing it again next year. And very quickly there'll be a normalization again where everybody's doing it each year again. The numbers are interesting. Right, HUD is going to use these numbers to inform Congress of what the homeless problem is, and from that, funding comes, and you're able to give a good idea of how much money should be allocated to try and fix these problems. But the count is flawed in a few different ways, and none of them are really a problem with the methodologies of how you're gathering it. Although I'm sure there are complaints with the data processing and things like that, but the reason it's a little bit flawed is it's meant to try and find the least amount of homeless people possible. And think about what I explained just a little bit ago of rural Utah, January, cold. Most amount of people are housed any way they can be. And so you do find the least amount of unsheltered individuals. What this doesn't convey is a true understanding of how many unsheltered individuals you may have in a given year inside of a local community. And it's these unsheltered individuals that we're providing resources for as a community, and matching the funding that comes from Congress to the minimum amount doesn't match the need for the amount of resources that groups actually have. And this is fairly well known. It's not unaccounted for. So it's not something to really be up in arms about, but it's just an interesting thing to think about, that sometimes we have a bias when we start gathering data. And the bias is to show the best foot forward, often to Congress. We want to show that numbers are going down, and communities often will do things to try and get their homeless numbers down in the point in time count, instead of removing the bias and just understanding how many people do we have, how can we help them, and what can we do a little bit better. Now, I mentioned that the count is often done by volunteers. If you'll pay attention between November, December, starting really in October, you'll start seeing people advertise for the need of people to come and participate in these counts. Now, if you want to come, it's a great experience and you won't regret it. You'll lose a little bit of sleep, and if you are in somewhere cold weather area, it'll be a little chilly. But it gives you a good chance to be able to go and understand at an intimate level the homeless problem in your area. This has been an explanation of the point in time count. Right? The point in time count is a count of how many homeless individuals are homeless and unsheltered at this point in time. Normally, a day in January in the middle of the night.